music to the noise, yeah, the mess we make. Machine Pun Kelly get caught in the fray. Facts and logic with a twist of jest. Strip it down to truth, yeah, forget the rest. Humor pulls the lights right out of the park. Look beyond the shadows that set the dark. Sparks of laughter fire up the night, bringing clarity where they blur the fight. Cut through the chaos, yeah, the tangle lies. Machine Pun Kelly with a set of clear eyes. Truths and jokes gonna rock this show. Step into light where the real facts glow. Step into
Hello, welcome to the Pun Show, and welcome to Kitty, my favorite co-host and friend and third favorite cat behind my cat and my wife. But anyway, it's been a weekend. Not much happened this weekend. Nobody got murdered by ICE, so that's good news. Don't have those weekends every time anymore. But I spent a lot of time looking into the so-called Save America Act, which is the most ridiculously named legislation in the history of all legislation. It is just a joke that this would be called Save America Act. Like, it is not going to save anything. And there's been a lot of rhetoric from the right. They keep trying to present this as a voter ID bill, which, while I have some issues with some of the voter ID bills, I think there's a false equivalence between a voter ID bill and a bill, you know, like a requirement that you have to prove you are who you say you are when you vote. Which even that, I think, is a bit overrated. In-person voter fraud is extremely rare for a reason. There's just not that much to be gained. And if you do it, you go to jail for 5 years. So most people aren't really willing to pretend to be somebody else so that they can get one more vote and risk 5 years in prison. But that aside, the Save America Act is not a voter ID bill. It includes voter ID, but it is a far cry from a voter ID bill. And I was thinking about this morning, and I think I want to present this to you to open things up, to explain how it's more than just a voter ID bill. Because I think if you get this, then it'll make a lot of difference to you. Compare it to gun control legislation. Like, I've had some people argue with me on Twitter. Well, why are you okay with voter ID, but why are you so mad about the Save America Act, but you're okay with having to show your ID to buy a gun? So let's take that and run with it. Like, let's really consider, what if the Save Act were like if you really had to buy a gun? Or more accurately, what if buying a gun, the requirements in the Save Act applied to guns the way they do to voting? Number one, you would not be able to buy a gun at the gun store and do your background check at the gun store. You would have to go to a government agency, fill out your background check there. You'd have to do it in person. Number two, you would have to show your citizenship. You'd have to show proof of citizenship, the same documents like your birth certificate, your passport, or your naturalization certificate. You'd have to show that at the store. And if you moved anytime at all, you would have to go to the government and you would have to, you know, change your registration. All right. So first of all, that would be quite a requirement, right? You would think that would be an inconvenience. That might be a little bit of infringement on your rights. You guys like to use that word, shall not be infringed. Okay, so that's number one. Number two, and this is where it gets really fun. Imagine that the state would have to take all the people that are on its little registry and send it to the federal government every month, every 30 days. So 13 times a year, actually, they would have to, no, 12 times a year, I'm sorry. 12 times a year, they would have to send this information to the government, to the federal government. Then the federal government would run it through its little database of people who are allowed to have guns. And if you came up as, you know, if you got flagged by that database, the state would have to go out to your house and take away all your guns. And the only way you could get them back is if you had to go through the same process all over again. And let's say on top of all of that, the federal government's little database flagged 25% of the time that it flagged that you weren't allowed to have a gun, it was a false flag. So all these gun owners would just be having states come up and take away their guns. And it could take weeks to get your guns back. Would you be okay with that? Do you think gun owners would be okay with that? You think the NRA would be okay with that? Because if you want to equate the gun rights to voting rights, this is what people are requiring of voting rights. So we're going to go into all of this today. We're going to go in, what does the SAVE Act really say? Instead of just presenting your ID when you vote. It's amazing. Whenever you hear Republicans defend this, I'm talking about Republicans, you know, like pundits or Republicans on TV, you know, like senators and congressmen in these interviews. Every time you see them defending it, every time you hear them defending it, they are never talking about what's in the act. They're just talking about voter ID laws. And they're saying things like, well, you know, we're the only country in the world that doesn't have a voter ID law. And it's like, this is not a voter ID law. This is way more than a voter ID law. And the fact that you don't want to talk about what is actually in the law tells me that you know that people don't want what's in the law. If people wanted what was in the law, Republicans would be talking about what is in the law. So I put together a slide deck because that's what I do here. And I also wanted to talk about what the constitutional requirement, what is actually unconstitutional about the SAVE Act. And so we're going to go through this. The SAVE Act, a solution in search of a problem, and how it falls apart under constitutional tests. So this one's a fun one. I think I'm getting a little bit better at putting these together. So what is Anderson-Burdick? That's how we want to start here. What is Anderson-Burdick? This slide was supposed to be about Anderson-Burdick, but I accidentally put in the wrong slide. So I might be getting better at it, but I'm still not good at it. Anyway, there is this test called Anderson-Burdick that was named after Anderson, after two court cases. Anderson versus Celebrezzi in 1983, and another case called Broderick versus Takashi in 1992. So what were those two things? What were those two tests, and what does it have to do with voting rights? So Anderson versus Celebrezzi, was John Anderson ran for president as an independent in 1992. Okay. And Ohio had set a March 8th deadline, which was really early for people to be on the ballot. You know, I mean, think about right now, we don't even know who the candidates are going to be, right? Sometimes by March 8th. And so the voters sued along with John Anderson. Anderson missed the deadline and he was kept off the ballot. And then they sued and they said, you can't do that because the voters then lose their right to vote for John Anderson. And this went all the way up to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court heard it and they ruled that was true, that this was too burdensome to the voters. This was the requirement took away the right of the voters to vote for Anderson. So then there is another test. There was another case called Burdick versus Takushi. And Alan Burdick wanted to write in a vote for his state rep. And Hawaii banned all write-in voting. And they made ballot access really, really easy through other means. Like it was really easy to get on the ballot, kind of the opposite of what happened in Ohio. But Burdick still wanted to write in a vote. And he was told, no, you can't do that. Your vote doesn't count. So then he sued. And Hawaii won. The court then decided that the burden on the state to have to go through and count in all the write-in ballots was too much of a burden on Hawaii, especially when they made it so easy to become to be on the actual ballot. So there's now this sliding scale that they use, right? Which is the burden on the state, the burden on the voters versus the justification by the state. Okay. If the burden on the voters is a lighter burden, then a weak justification, then the voting, I'm sorry, the burden on the state is heavy. If the burden on the state is heavy, or if the burden on the state is light and the justification for it is weak, then the voter right is upheld. If the burden on the state is heavy but the justification is weak, then it's struck down. If it's heavy burden but a strong justification, it kind of depends. So you got this two sides, right? You've got the voter rights and you've got the state's rights, and the state burden. And if this is big and that's small, then this wins. If this is big and that's small, then this wins. If they're both about the same size, it's all going to depend. So what is greater here when we're talking about the SAVE Act? Are we talking about the burden of the state, the burden on the voters, or are we talking about the burden on the state? Which is greater? So this is the problem. We'll go into this and establish it. But there, right now, if you look over the last 44 years, the Heritage Foundation has done a database, and they've looked at every case of proven voter fraud of all types, not just voter fraud by undocumented workers or immigrants or whatever, non-citizens of any kind. There's only been about 1,600 out of like 3 billion votes that have been cast in 44 years, which is about 1 out of every 5 million votes. So there's the idea that there is rampant voter fraud just doesn't exist. There is no rampant voter fraud. That's just a fact. The Heritage Foundation covers from 1982 to 2026 all types of frauds. And by the way, this is votes in primaries, school boards, city elections, city council elections, mayor elections, police chief or sheriff, or county elections, state elections, federal elections, every kind of election. If you go to your local precinct and cast a vote, it includes that vote. All right. And out of all of that, over 44 years, it found 1,600 votes. That's a 0.000002% fraud rate. And of those, it's still only even of those 1,600, only 61 of those cases were cases of non-citizen voting. So what is the interest of the state? The thing they're trying to protect here is 61 cases over 44 years. The SAVE Act effectiveness would have prevented 3.9%, just 3.9% of all that fraud. So this is one thing that I think that is maybe not. Oh, and 51 of those 61, 10 of those used the fake IDs. So it wouldn't even have prevented every instance of non-citizen voting fraud. So only 51 cases. It would have prevented 51 cases out of billions of votes over 44 years. And only 3.9% of all voter fraud of any kind. It doesn't even address the other 96.1% of voter fraud. So they're talking about, oh, we're worried about voter fraud. We're worried about voter fraud. No, you're worried about one type of voter fraud. And that type of voter fraud almost doesn't even happen. So why is it so ineffective? Is most voter fraud isn't non-citizen voting. Many cases involved fake documents and stolen identities. The SAVE Act checks if you have documents, not if they're real. This is security theater, not actual security. So, got some comments here. So there are more victims of Trump and Epstein than acts of voter fraud. Oh, way more. I guess at least 20 times as much, right? There's over 1,000 victims of Epstein. The Heritage Foundation. This is worth pointing out. Thank you, Kitty. The Heritage Foundation they started this study to prove how rampant voter fraud is. Like, you can say, oh, this was a biased study or whatever. And it's not like the Brennan Center or some liberal group did this study. This study was done by the Heritage Foundation. That's why I'm using that one. It is the most complete study that there is, and they are not trying to, cherry pick. Every single case that was convicted, they have. Every single one. Nice to know the GOP continues to be consistent in their priorities with anti-women legislation versus actual law and order. Right, because there's definitely some anti-women stuff going on here. So the Kansas actually, they had a similar situation. They tried passing a similar law. Before that they had 0.0002% non-citizen registration. And while we're on this, I want to emphasize something. There is a difference between registering and voting. Registering, sometimes people register on accident, never having any intention of voting. And sometimes they're not even the ones that register themselves. And it's still rare. It's still rare. Like over here, it's like 0.002% of non-citizen registration. It's still very, very rare. But it's like there's 1,000 of those for every person that actually votes. Like Utah, they did a thing and they studied, they looked at 2 million voters, and they found one non-citizen registered, and that non-citizen didn't vote. So you see, like the people that are trying to push this nonsense, you'll often see them talk about registered voters, and they're trying to make it seem like registered voters is evidence of voting. You can register and not vote. Most of the non-citizens that register never vote, and that is still an extremely low number. But what happened in this Kansas experiment is that they actually prevented more citizens from voting than non-citizens from voting. It's like burning down your house to kill a spider. They know there's no spider. I think the Kansas experiment. Okay, there we go. Sorry, it was right there. 31,000 citizens were blocked. 12% of all applicants weren't able to vote or weren't able to register. So they stopped 31,000 citizens from being able to register to vote, and they prevented like a handful, if that, of citizens from voting. So this is the problem, and this is why I want to go back to that scale. Who is the greater burden on here? The state or the voting population? Is 12% bigger than 0.000. Excuse me. Which is a bigger number, 0.0002 or 12? Let's figure that. That's like 25, 250, 2,500. So about 25,000 citizens that you prevent from voting for every non-citizen. So it looks like maybe one non-citizen tried to register, looking at the numbers there. So anyway, here's the burden on on legal voters. Let me check and see if we got some comments. It is a wonderful day when a great American gives Trump the Kirk treatment. No, I'm not going to say that. Do mail-in ballots go to all registered voters? It depends on what state you're in. And different states have different ways to make sure that registered voters are citizens. But most states do not automatically send out mail-out ballots to all registered voters. I think there's only a couple, and then they check citizenship to make sure. Like California, I think does, and Washington. I think those are the only two. But they're the ones that, like, when you register, they have systems that check to make sure that you're a citizen when you register. So it's kind of a moot point. They're not sending ballots to non-citizens, like if that's the connection you're trying to make. Voter ID equals poll tax. Yeah, we'll get to that too. But I want to stay away from the idea that Save America is a voter ID bill. It's not a voter ID bill. It's more than a voter ID bill. It includes voter ID, but it's not a voter ID bill. Calling it a voter ID bill is too lenient. Government Plus now handles passport processing. Who is the billionaire? I don't know. I know that they've just recently cut down the people that They cut the department didn't cut it down. They cut down the size of the department that processes passports. So now it'll take longer to get your passports too. But you don't really need a passport to vote. You just need a birth certificate, and you need a birth certificate to get your passport anyway. Which makes the whole passport versus birth certificate thing sort of, I mean, like, you can show your passport and register. So if you can find your passport and not your birth certificate, I guess that matters. But if you need to get one, you need to get your birth certificate to get your passport too. Okay, so let's. Right now, 146 million Americans don't have a passport. You have 69 million women with name mismatches. You have 3.8 million people with no birth certificate at all. You have 21% Black adults with no driver's license, and 20% earning less than $50K with no passport. So the point of all this is just this law affects some people disproportionately. You're not going to see that many men with name mismatches. And yes, you can say that women can reconcile the name mismatches. And I think that there's been some, I've seen some sort of misrepresentation of this on the left, that the states get to decide whether or not your marriage certificate is enough to prove that your name was changed. So if you brought in your birth certificate and your marriage certificate and a photo ID, then you could register to vote. But the state has to like pass the legislation to make that the case and everything. And that's not a thing that men have to do. So the 14th Amendment is like very clear. You can't put a burden on some people that you don't put on everybody. This is isolating a certain class of people, married women, and saying you have to jump through this hoop that other people don't have to jump through. So that's got some problems. And if it disproportionately affects people like Black people, then that also becomes an issue. And then there's also the fact that there's the 3.8 million that don't have a birth certificate at all. All right. Up until the 50s, I think it was, that they started making it that even if you were born at home, you had to get a birth certificate. But there are people that were born in the 50s and earlier. So anybody that's, over 70, this could apply to, may not have birth certificates. There are about 3.8 million people who don't have a birth certificate. There's also people that, for instance, a lot of the, in New Orleans, a lot of the facilities where they were stored at were destroyed in Hurricane Katrina. So there's a lot of people that were born in New Orleans that don't have access to original birth certificates. There are also people like where, fires burned down their hospital or whatever. So anyway, there's about 3.8 million people that have no birth certificate to obtain. There may be workarounds for those, and that's up to the state to decide how you to do it. But those are 3.8 million people that have to jump through more hoops. It's not just, oh, well, there's an alternative way they can get around that. There shouldn't have to be an alternative way for them to get around that. Used to be, the way it is right now is you still have to prove you're a citizenship. You're a citizen. Like when I voted, when I registered, I brought my birth certificate. I don't have a problem with saying that. But for people that can't, that don't have their birth certificate and don't have the money to get it, then there's a box that you can just say that you, swear under penalty of law that you're an American citizen, and you check this box. And if you, lie about that, you can go to jail for 5 years. And most people aren't really wanting to go to jail over 5 years so that they can register to vote. So they don't, this is not a proven thing that people are lying about, which is why I went through the numbers first. Just people are not registering to vote in massive numbers illegally. It's just not happening. So let's look at some of these comments. You have to have an ID. Yeah, nobody cares about that. The wild thing is that this graphic knows everybody's situation concerning them. I don't think the graphic knows anything at all. This is just a graphic displaying numbers of people that have certain things. Like, why is that wild? Like, you know, they this is not the graphic knows everybody's individual situation. Such a weird comment. Just an excuse for the Democrats to cheat as usual. Where's the evidence that Democrats are cheating? Where is the evidence that this is happening? Why would you need a birth certificate when we have social security cards or ID? You can get social security cards and ID if you're not a citizen. You don't need a birth certificate. You need proof of citizenship. And the primary ways that you can prove citizenship is through three things. One is birth certificate. One is passport. One is a naturalization certificate. Make it free to get a birth certificate. People do what they want to do. If they want to travel to England, bad enough, they jump through hoops to get one. That is one thing that people have argued. If you know that if you made it free, then it would make it a lot more fair. But the SAVE Act doesn't do that. I don't know where my birth certificate is. I don't know where mine is either. I have to order a new one. And to order one, even if you do make it free, by the way, it can take like 6 weeks. So if you don't order it in time, you got to think, not every state has lets you register on the day of. So you've got to figure out what state you're in. You've got to determine what the cutoff date is to register. And then you've got to figure out how long do you have to get your birth certificate. And then you've got to go over there. So all of this just kind of adds to the different hoops you got to jump through. So everybody, you know, like when people are talking about the 69 million women, well, what if that woman doesn't know where their marriage certificate is? Maybe it got lost. Maybe it got burned up in a fire, you know? And maybe out of the 69 million, it's not all 69 million don't know where it is. Well, let's say just a million. 1 out of every 69. That's a million women that you know, basically disenfranchise. Are you willing to disenfranchise a million people over 51 votes over a 44-year period? I don't know where. Oh, okay. We should all be able to prove we're Americans easily. Why? Why should we all be able to prove that? That's a blanket statement. No, we shouldn't. That's actually a very, very Nazi thing to say. That's like, we should all carry our papers. If you weren't carrying, if you carry your papers, you don't have to worry about anything. If America sucks, why do people stay and want in so badly? Who's saying America sucks? All right. Well, Daniel is no longer here. MAGA, yay. Okay. All right. So let's go to the next one. All right. So the financial burden. Why this is somebody had brought up the finances. So you want to get a birth certificate, that can cost anywhere from $8 to $25. think you can get it expedited for another fee. It can be like $40, $50, depending on how long you have. A passport is $165. It's $130 for the actual passport, a $35 fee. There's a marriage certificate. If you lost that, that can be anywhere from $8 to $20. Time off of work is unpaid. So like you have to, take time out of your day to go and apply for the passport, go to the post office or whatever and fill out the paperwork. You have to, bring your birth. You can't do this online. You can't register online. You have to take your paperwork down to the DMV, wait through hell for, 12 to 15 hours, depending on where you live. You have the expense of transportation to get there and back. So altogether, like all of this, if you had to take time off of work and you were a wage earner, then that means that work you did not get paid for. So if you make $15 an hour and you have to take a half a day off of work, that means it costs you another $60 to register to vote. And the goal here is not necessarily to prevent voter fraud, right? The goal here might be to prevent people from voting. The transportation. Okay, this is I found this is interesting. So the fee, to get be able to register to vote is north of $20, $30, $40, right? The Jim Crow poll taxes were the equivalent in today's currency about $10.64. So this is actually a higher poll tax than the Jim Crow era poll taxes. So the 24th Amendment was ratified in 1964. It says no poll taxes. Harper versus Virginia was the case that payment as voting standard is unconstitutional. So you can't charge people to vote. That is effectively what this is. If you're charging people to be able to register to vote, then that's the case. There are some states that have voter ID laws where they I think even Alabama has a public access law or something like that. I can't remember what it's called, but even birth certificates are free in Alabama. If you need it for your voter ID, you can get a free birth certificate. So credit to Alabama for that. Virginia tried to work around it with this resident certificate thing, which had all kinds of loopholes and whatnot. Like you had to live there for 6 months before you registered, and you had to promise you weren't going to move. And that meant didn't mean move somewhere else in the state. Meant you couldn't move from your house. So of course, poor people are more likely to move because they're more likely to rent, which means they're more likely to need to move, things like that. So that kind of limited people from being able to vote. Anyway, the court decided that use other documents, requiring other documents and charging for other documents to be able to move or to be able to vote, that counted as a poll tax. So that's what this is, right? This is a Supreme Court precedent. Paid documents is a de facto poll tax. Voter IDs that you have to pay for are a de facto poll tax. If you can't afford $25, how are you living? Doesn't matter. Are you one of those small hot people? Small hat people. I don't know. If you're married, you have a free copy of the certificate. If you lose it, then you need to pay a filing fee. Yes. What if you lost it? The most unqualified and inept administration ever. I think that's a fair statement. How can anyone be against voter fraud? Nobody. I think everybody's against voter fraud. The problem is that this isn't really addressing voter fraud. You weren't here at the beginning, so I'll say this again. There are only 51 cases of voter fraud over the last 44 years that the SAVE Act would have prevented. This is not about voter fraud. If this were this right here, this act would have only prevented 3.9% of all voter fraud over the last 44 years. If you're ignoring 95% of 96% of all voter fraud, how can you say that this case is about voter fraud? If this were actually about voter fraud, it would be about voter fraud. But it's not. It's about preventing people from voting. This actually prevents millions of people from voting, but it doesn't, almost like all of them are people that would be voting legally. Shouldn't need a license to vote. That is not what the Supreme Court says. Weakness is not a reason, it is an excuse. Okay, that's your argument. This guy is trying to make the case that $8 to $25 is going to stop someone from voting. No, this is a guy that's trying to make the case that $8 to $25 is an unconstitutional poll tax. The Jim Crow laws said $1.25. I mean, in their time, it was $1.25. And the Supreme Court said that is unconstitutional. Whether you think that is an unconstitutional amount of money is irrelevant. It is. Charging any money at all is unconstitutional. You cannot charge people money to vote, period. I could poop a better cabinet. Trying to think of a pun there. It is not different than saying you must own property to be a voter. Hey, that's pretty constitutional. Don't think that's the case anymore, though. So this gets us into a circular trap. So then you need a birth certificate for a license, and then you need the license. There's another trap into that, right? Someplace, like, let's say you need to get a birth certificate. How do you get a birth certificate? Can you just go and get anybody's birth certificate? What's to keep you from just going and getting anybody's birth certificate? This is one of the things people overlook. I can't just go and get your birth certificate and then bring that birth certificate to the DMV and say, I'm Brad Pitt. I can't get Brad Pitt's birth certificate and then go say I'm Brad Pitt. You have to prove you're Brad Pitt to get Brad Pitt's birth certificate. And you need a license to get Brad Pitt's birth certificate to prove you're Brad Pitt. So if you don't have a license or you don't have an ID, how do you get your birth certificate? And if you don't have a birth certificate, how do you get your ID? And you've got to figure all of this stuff out. You got to work it out. And you have to take time off of work, which costs you more money. So, Mr. $8 to $25. What about a day of work? If you're a low-wage worker, that's a lot of money. When you don't have $8 to $25 extra dollars, $8 to $25 is a lot of money. When you don't have any money, an entire day's work is a lot of money. Offices open 9 to 5. So you can't go after work a lot of times. A lot of these people can't just wait until after work and go, because these are government buildings that are, that are open during business hours. You don't have a car, you got to take the bus. That means it takes longer to go there. It takes longer to go there. That means you have to take more time off of work. And so you have the bus fee plus the lost wages. You have name mismatch issues. So let's say you were a married woman and you have the name on your driver's license, but not on your birth certificate, and you can't find your marriage certificate. So then you got to get your marriage certificate to prove that you were married and that what your original name was, and then you can use that to get your birth certificate and back channel it. But that means you've got to go and you've got to order your marriage certificate and wait for your birth certificate and then get your birth certificate. So all of this stuff can just create confusion and chaos, and it is people have to jump through these hoops. I hear people make this stupid argument. Oh, well, you're saying that they're too stupid to do that. Nobody is saying they're too stupid to do that. You're too stupid to know the difference. The reason that it's just there are complications for some people. If you do not have all the documents, there are complications. If you do have all the documents, there aren't any. Well, except for if you move, in which case, even if you move next door, you have to actually go to the DMV or wherever it is you go and change your address physically present there. Why can't you do that online? Like, honestly, why can't you do that online? Why do you have to go do that in person? Well, the SAVE Act says you have to do it on purpose. Right now, 5.9% of people that change their address or update their registration do it in person. The rest either do it by mail or online. You can't do that anymore under the SAVE Act. Why not? How does that prevent voter fraud? You have, all right, let me check some comments here. IQ test to vote? No, but there were literacy tests to vote. And a lot of people that are saying, well, why don't you just get your paperwork, would have been saying, well, why don't you just study for your literacy test? If you don't need an ID to vote, what's to say you don't vote twice or more? Have you ever voted, Cole? Honestly, have you ever voted? Millions of people. If you have voted, when you go to vote, you have to check in, right? And they check off your name. They say, "Who are you?" And then I say, "I'm Kelly Scaletta," and then they look and they check me off to show that I voted. What am I going to do? How am I going to vote twice? If somebody comes and is somebody else going to come and say that they're Kelly Scaletta and then vote for me? When they sign their name, you have to sign your name when you vote, right? Like, you checked in, you sign your name. Like, have you ever voted, Cole? You would know this if you had voted. Millions of people cross the border illegally, and now you want them to. Nobody's saying that okay. First of all, millions of people did not cross the border illegally that are here now. I mean, that's just not true, and it's also not relevant. Now you want them to vote. No, I don't want them to vote. Nobody wants them to vote. They're not voting. We've already been through this. There have been 51 cases of non-citizens voting that the SAVE Act would have prevented from voting over 44 years. This is not a rant, little dude. My little sponge cake brained friend. This is not a rant. This is me stating facts that you do not like to hear because you can't absorb them. Use that sponge cake brain of yours to absorb something. You haven't learned anything, but that's on you. You are really. I'm not reaching for a problem. The ones that are reaching for the problem are the ones that are inventing boogeyman voters. Who doesn't have a deal with their own name? Lots of people don't. And it's not really relevant. You can have a driver's license with your real name and not be able to vote, Jimmy. This is not about voter IDs at all. I'm going to feel like I'm going to have to say this at least 5,000 times today. It's not about voter IDs. Guy is smoking the dumbest. It's nobody's talking about voter IDs. Okay, you're so what? So does mine. This is not about voter IDs. Check with your birth. Okay. Okay, this Mark, we're not talking about what the situation is right now. We're talking about the situation that the SAVE Act would require. All right. So I saw a lot of this on Twitter over the last few days, is people saying, well, that's not the way it is. Well, the SAVE Act changes everything. There are only, right now, believe it or not, there are only 3 states that require you prove your citizenship before you vote. I think it's Wyoming, New Hampshire, and I forget the third one. There's 4 other states that they have legislation that's not currently being enforced. Texas doesn't have it. You would think Texas would. Nope. Texas does not require you prove your citizenship to vote. So most of the country, I mean, especially when you consider, 2 of them are Wyoming and New Hampshire, not exactly the biggest populations. Most of the country would be affected by this change. Their voting registration laws would change. And so since we've got more people on here now, I'm going to repeat what I said earlier, because I think you need to understand it in the context of what the SAVE Act actually does. So I had a lot of people comparing this to the Second Amendment and saying, well, why are you okay with showing an ID to get a gun, but you're not okay showing an ID to get to vote? Why is it different? The First Amendment and the Second Amendment. All right, so here's the difference. All right, let's just say that the Second Amendment, in order to get a gun, you had to meet the same requirements that are in the the SAVE Act. I'm sorry. To get a gun, you have the same requirements that are in the SAVE Act. That would mean, 1, you would have to prove your citizenship with the same documents: birth certificate, a passport, or a naturalization certificate. In some cases, but not most cases, the real ID might work, or a military ID might work. But even with those 2 things, not always. Most of the time, it would not. You'd have to get a very specific version of it, and you would know if you had done that. Okay, so that's number 1. Number 2, you would have to go get it in person. You wouldn't even be able to fill out your background check and stuff from a gun store. You'd have to go into a government agency directly, physically. You'd have to go there and fill out the paperwork and show your ID there. Okay, that's number 2. Number 3, every 30 days, the state would be required by law to send in all the people that are registered gun owners to the federal government. Would you be okay with that? Would you be cool with that? Would you think maybe that's a little bit of government overreach? Why does the federal government need to know who has guns? Well, why does the federal government need to know who's voting? All right, so that's number 2. Number 3. Number 4, they would then run everything through a system. They have their little computer database, and they would say none of these people should have guns. And then they would send it back to the states. Every 30 days, this would happen. And then they would have to purge those gun owners. So that means that the state would go out and they would take away your gun rights. They would actually remove your guns from you. Every 30 days, they would go and remove guns from everybody that the little federal government computer system spat out. Oh, and by the way, that little federal government computer system has a 25% error rate. And then they would go, and even if you're even if the thing was wrong and said that you shouldn't be owning a gun, the state would come out and they would take away your gun right. And you could still, you could get it back, but you have to get your birth certificate again. You have to get back to the state and you have to prove it again. And then you can get your guns back. And this happens every 30 days. And if you move, you have to go and you have to tell them you moved in person. Can't do it online. So what do you think? Do you think that a few gun owners might have a problem with that? That is what the SAVE Act does to voting rights. The SAVE Act requires all of that, but just change the word voting for guns. Now you see why I have a problem with it. It is not voter ID law. It is excluding people from voting law. Okay, wait, see if we got some comments. Okay. Home births, they do now, but they didn't always, not since the 50s. Or since the 50s. And it's not just home births. There's also people, like I was saying, if you were here, I don't know if you were here and didn't listen, or if you weren't here, places like New Orleans, hospitals get destroyed. Some of these certificates are no longer findable, no longer in existence. I do not even watch CNN. For local elections, states can allow non-citizens to vote. Yeah. That we're talking about federal elections. CNN tells me to hate, therefore I don't even watch CNN. However, otherwise, they tend to require social security numbers, which are only allowed for citizens in the first place. There are immigrants with social security numbers that are not citizens. Isn't that what most left people want? Anyway, I don't know what most left people want. I don't even know what you're saying they want. Had to show my driver's license and get background check to buy my guns. Right. So what do you think about the rest of it, John? Do you think that your state should have to send over all the registered gun owners to the state every 30 days so that they can run through it and give you another background check and then say, oh, you failed this background check? And so then the state comes out and take your guns away. Would you be comfortable with that? With the federal government maintaining a database of you and all the other gun owners in America? Didn't think so. Amazing how you don't have anything to say all of a sudden. All right, so what happened in the 50s, or back in the Jim Crow era? Jim Crow hospitals refused to admit black mothers. So the people that were born at home in the 50s and before, like before Jim Crow was done away with, back in the pre-segregation days, are disproportionately black, and they would be born at home with no birth certificate. 2% of voters just don't have a birth certificate available because they were born at home where none was made. There's other instances where things will happen, like the parents didn't have a name for the baby. And so then the first name on the birth certificate just says Baby Johnson. And so then that doesn't have the first name, so it doesn't match. There's other cases where the hospitals were destroyed, like in Hurricane Katrina or in fires or things like that. So this disproportionately affects poor people, it disproportionately affects women, and it disproportionately affects black people, which is all a violation of the 14th Amendment. Equal protection prohibits discriminatory impact. This disproportionately affects people of color, 21% black, no license. Women, 65 million name mismatch, low income, 20% have no passports, or only 20% of low income people have passports. Rural, that's another thing that you have to consider is how far it is to drive to register. Why can't you register online? You know, elderly, home births. So all of these classes of people, I mean, obviously the people that have been born in the last 50 years or since home births require birth certificates, obviously you're going to have birth certificates. But this has not always been the case. And, I see people acting like this hasn't been the case since the 1800s. But no. You have people that are in their 70s that were born at home without a birth certificate. So what the SAVE Act does is it kills online registration. 11 million users since 2022. Kills mail-in registration. 7 million users since 2022. So that just invalidates 18 million registrations in the last 3 years. And you think all 18 million of those are fake or whatever? More importantly, it kills registration drives. Which is actually, we'll get into that. That's a violation of the First Amendment. If you can't register people, in registration drives, it kind of defeats the purpose of the registration drive. 42 million people move every year. And in order, when they move, they have to go and in person, they have to update their records. And by the way, I don't know if you're familiar with the concept, but there's something called an unfunded mandate, and that's where you require states to do something, where the federal government requires states to do something and then don't give them the money to do it. That's unconstitutional. That's a violation of the principle of federalism. And so they're saying that when they say you have to go in and register, I think it's less than 6% of people register in person. Now it's going to be 100%. That means that all those DMVs and places where people are working right now, they're going to have that much more work to do. But they're not going to have more funding to get more people to do all that extra work. So it becomes an unfunded mandate. So is the state going to have to hire more people? Who's going to pay for those workers? Name changes. Party changes. Your name change. You got married, you got to go into the thing. You want to say, I'm not a Democrat anymore, I'm a Republican. I want to vote in the Republican primary. You got to go in. There's 70 to 90 million registrations updated per cycle. That's 79 million people. 70 to 90 million people. I'm sorry. They're going to have to go into DMV and update their registration instead of being able to do it online. Why can't you just change your address online? Like, how is that preventing voter fraud? One in three registrations use online mail drives. For initial registrations, forces tens of millions to take time off of work, find transportation, navigate bureaucracy, and present docs and persons. All to solve a problem that does not exist. There just are not non-citizens voting. Again, the SAVE Act would have prevented 51 non-citizens from voting over the last 44 years. You're talking about impacting millions and millions and millions of people every year, because 51 total non-citizens since 1982 have voted. Okay. This country is a joke. It's like a practical joke. Move some people shouldn't have to move to satiate nonsense about non-citizens voting. If Don, I don't know what that's supposed to be in reference to. For local elections, states can allow non-citizens to vote. Oh wait, how did I think? Okay. They already have a database for guns, and they already have databases for votes in state. For they have voting rolls in states, dude. The question is not whether you have the database, it's whether you have to send it into the federal government. Why are you okay with sending the federal government voting rolls, but not government, not gun ownership rolls? Just like the fly list, got to have that star on the driver's license. No, it's not really the same thing, actually. Votes in 2024 went up in Georgia. Flying, John, is not a right. It's not a constitutional right. Voting is. Votes in 2024 went up in Georgia after. Yes, we're not talking about voter ID. I'm not talking. See, you don't understand what voter ID like. Okay, you're just yelling things now. Republicans can only win by cheating. Always was the case. Can you buy guns on select days of the year and select locations linked to where you were registered to buy guns? Can you only buy guns on select days of the year and select locations linked to where you registered to buy guns? Depends on what you mean. You can buy a privately owned gun, I think, any day of the year, and I don't understand the question or the relevance. I think that I'm pretty sure that federal gun stores might be regulated and those sorts of things, but not all guns are bought at federal or bought at federal gun stores. You already registered to vote. They have no reason to do this, right? They don't, and that's why that's what I keep trying to figure out. Why are they doing this? People say, well, if you're not here illegally, what do you have to worry about? And it's like, well, I'm worried about why they're doing it, because there isn't a problem. So I'm actually asking that question. Why are they doing it? If there is no problem to solve, why are they doing it? Why are they so desperate to solve a problem that doesn't exist, unless they're trying to solve a problem, trying to do something and pretending there's a problem that doesn't exist to get away with doing it. It's funny how it's different from buying guns, right? Can you imagine if the federal government passed a law that said you have to turn in all your gun ownership registration stuff once a year or once a month to the federal government, so that the federal government could run it against a database of everybody that passed background checks and determine whether or not you should be able to keep your gun. Okay. So let's go over some of the other constitutional things, constitutional problems with the SAVE Act. The First Amendment, registration drives are a protected association. Churches, civic groups, nonprofits, it's a core political association. So there is a constitutional right to have registration drives, but when you make registration impossible, you are basically making registration drives impossible. So the SAVE Act is a violation of the First Amendment. SAVE Act ends this with their in-person requirement. No copies allowed. Criminalizes workers, even if person is citizen. So if you were to register somebody wrongly, like if you were to make a mistake in registering somebody, then you could be criminalized, you could be prosecuted for that, And not only that, you could also be sued by anybody that wants to sue you. And so that is also a disincentive to people that want to go out and register people, because all it takes is one ornery MAGA to ruin your life. Okay. Oh, whoops. Okay. Let's see. Some Republicans can only win by cheating. Always was the case. Oh, wait. If illegals don't vote, then why are Democrats flipping out over their... No, okay. Illegals, like non-citizens, don't vote. So why do Republicans feel the need to take away the voting rights of American citizens? That's the question. The question is not, why are we worried about taking away the rights of taking away non-immigrant vote? We're actually worried about taking away actual American citizen votes. Why aren't you worried about the government taking away the rights of American citizens to vote? Do you think that American citizens have the right to vote? America needs the SAVE Act. No, we don't. Why? I don't know what the why. Oh, to America needs this. What evidence do we have? We need it. The undocumented migrants aren't voting. They're not. We went through this at the beginning. There are 51 cases over the last 44 years of non-citizens voting. Don't even know how many of those were here illegally, by the way. Non-citizens, period, voting over the last 44 years. Non-citizens are not voting. It's just not a thing. I know Donald Trump keeps telling you that non-citizens are voting, that millions of illegals are voting. Do you really think that everything is that inept? That nobody knows? You realize that every single precinct, there are Republican staffers there monitoring the elections. Do you think that millions of undocumented migrants are going in there and voting illegally and they're just watching it happen? Like, how stupid do you have to be to think that millions of non-citizens are voting, but only 44 have been caught over the last, or only 51 have been caught over the last 44 years? You just have to be monumentally stupid. You have to willfully refuse to use your brain for the function whence the good Lord made it. You have to be so obdurate, so obtuse, so dense that you are incapable of processing a rational thought in order to think that millions and millions of undocumented people are voting. You're an idiot if you think that. You don't need to be an idiot, though. Being an idiot in this case is a choice. Stop being an idiot. Start thinking, how is this happening? How is this happening if it's happening? Why is it that all these Republicans and all of these blue states that are in the blue precincts watching the votes happen, why aren't they saying anything? Are you really that obdurate that you cannot open up your brain, even a crack, to let a little bit of light in? Nobody let 20 million illegal, and goodness gracious, people using the word illegals as though it's a noun. You just show your racism when you use that word. Nobody's too dumb to get an ID. We've been through that. This is like arguing with MAGA is just so frustrating, because no matter how hard you try to have an honest discussion, no matter how hard you try to present facts, no matter how hard you try to treat them with respect and dignity, they just prove they're not worth it. It's just everything has to be lies with them. Why? Why? You just illegals are voting, illegals are voting, illegals are voting. Joe Biden let 20 million in. None of that is true. And you can't prove it. There's zero evidence of that. If it's all happening, why can't you prove it? Why do you have to be so racist that you can't think? Why does your hatred have to drive your entire brain engine? Think. Why are Republican monitors letting these so-called millions of illegals vote? Think about it, please. They have not been. And it's always only in blue states. For some reason, it's only in blue states. And blue states only have Democrats. It's so dumb. You're too dumb. If you're too dumb, you're too dumb to think, Hector. Okay. So not one person is actually responding to the substance. Every dishonest MAGA in here is just glossing over everything that I'm saying. Because you know I'm right. You know that I am right. You are incapable of having a conversation based in the facts because the facts prove you wrong. How stupid you can be easy to vote. No ID proof you of American. Dude, that's not even English. I know illegals who speak better English than that. We have found an abandoned parking lot in Los Angeles. No, you don't. No, you didn't. That's a lie. That's an absolute lie. Why are you lying? If you have to lie to make your point, you're kind of just making a point that you're a liar. Russia interfered in the 2016 election. There was no hoax. Why are we voting? They're fighting not to Democrats. Blue states do go through and update their voting rolls. What they're fighting is giving them to Donald Trump and this Department of Justice, which no federal government has ever asked for before. If Joe Biden had asked Texas for its voting rolls, do you think Texas would have turned them over? If Joe Biden said, Texas, we want all the details on all the people that own your guns, that own guns there, would Texas turn them over? Why is the federal, you're asking the wrong question. The question is, why is the Department of Justice demanding voter rolls at all, especially when there's zero evidence that non-citizens are voting? Again, 51 cases of non-citizens voting in 44 years that would have been stopped by the SAVE Act. No, there's not. No, there's not. The 10 million numbers comes from the U.S. customer. And no, you don't understand what the numbers you're looking at. That includes people that were sent back, dude. They didn't just come over here and get an engraved invitation. Please learn to actually think. Do you really think 10 million, 20 million illegal immigrants are running around in the country now because of Joe Biden? You have to be just stupid to think that. Stop being stupid, please. This country needs MAGA to stop being stupid. We cannot go on with half the country just being stupid. I'm not talking stupid like inability to think. I'm talking stupid refusal to think. Why can't MAGA think? Why won't MAGA think? No, 20 million illegal immigrants are not running about the country because of Joe Biden. That's just dumb. That's dumb on a layered level. That is dumb on a level that means if you believe that, you never even bothered to start thinking for a second. How do you know that the number that you are talking about, that DHS says, those are encounters? That means that those people were encountered. If they were encountered, we don't have open borders. That's how people are being encountered. Encountered by whom? By DHS, by Border Patrol. My goodness. It's like just stupid on stupid. It's like you're a stupid sandwich with extra stupid in the middle, and stupid is all the condiments. Only a fool argues. The people lost every single case in their hunt for voter fraud. Why argue with them? I don't know, dude. I keep hoping that some of them might think. And I guess because we need to, like, this SAVE Act is, all right, man. Man, I wish Kitty isn't here right now. Democrats in California are using school children during school hours to protest their belief without parents' permission. Oh, piss off. Bondi has Down syndrome. The Dow's over 50. Hey, buddy, we can prove it. No, you can't. All right, Dan, I'm just trying to start getting rid of some people here. You can't prove it because it's not true. All right, some of the more ridiculous trolls are time to start getting rid of some trolls. All I said where the number came from. Yes. And then you refused you misrepresented the number. What, dude, does encounters mean? You tried to draw a parallel between 10 million encounters and suggested that meant 10 million illegals are voting in America or something. That's such a dumb argument. Just pretend Bondi has the biggest brown noser. Here's the thing. If you were to slap the crap out of Pam Bondi, would there be anything left? Not that I'm not encouraging violence in any way. It's just a thought experiment. This country needs you to stop. So there's no such thing. Like this. See, this is just. What is the point of a post like that? Time to get rid of the trolls. Bye, troll. All right, bye, troll. All right, just getting rid of some of the trolls. All right. That should help. All right, so I've gotten rid of immigrants. MAGA convinced me we should try open border. Might not be a bad idea. You're talking about the same people that believe that COVID was real. COVID is real. Still is real. You're talking about the people that think. I'm talking about the people that think COVID wasn't real and then died of it. Well, not all of them, but if maggots had critical thinking skills, they wouldn't be maggots. Nobody, yeah. I mean, it's like it's hard to have a logical conversation with people that don't know how logic is supposed to work. Okay. Like that logic is actually a thing. Are we great? Trump's got a booger eating spaz muffin. Trump's a booger eating spaz muffin. I'm not saying there's a ton of voter fraud. I just want. Okay, then why? This is why. Okay, let's say as bad that you want to get rid of voter fraud. Shouldn't the SAVE Act only in 44 years, we went over this at the beginning, there have been about 1,600 cases of voter fraud that have actually, been proven, which is actually out of 3 billion votes is really actually very, very impressive. The SAVE Act would only prevent 3.9% of all voter fraud that happened over that span. So if you actually wanted to get rid of voter fraud, if you wanted to address real voter fraud, wouldn't you want to address real voter fraud? Like, if you're only getting 3.9% of the voter fraud, is the thing that you're trying to eliminate, is that happening? And we'll go back to we'll get back to something in a minute. But you also have to look at the other side of that. If you're eliminating 5 million legal votes for every case of voter fraud that you eliminate, if you're eliminating 5 million legal votes for every one illegal vote, what have you accomplished? Are you trying to get rid of the legal votes, or are you trying to get rid of the illegal votes? Because you're much more effective at getting the legal one, getting rid of the legal ones. They have civilian body pits in San Diego sewers and creek low tides at the beach. I don't know who they is, or I don't know what that's a weird thing. They were literally told they were cartel drones. Oh, then the whole balloons thing, that was hilarious. I was singing 9 and 9 Sig Luft balloons. And then it was 8 and 9 Sig Luft balloons. And then gradually going down. I think they ended up getting 4 of those balloons. We live on Main Street, not Wall Street. I got COVID and took the vaccine. I know of people personally who died from COVID. Yeah, it's not like over 5 million people worldwide didn't die of COVID or something. Only makes sense, open border, be good for the economy. Well, there wasn't an open border. There was just a president that acknowledged asylum rights. Piss off about claiming teachers are using kids against parents' will. When you were a kid, were you that easily manipulated by teachers? Piss off with your trying to... Do you realize that these kids, they're talking about their friends' parents? That they're not being manipulated? Maybe they actually believe what they're protesting? Such a dick. Don't be a dick. Remember that the one movie with the Ant-Man, the third one? Don't be a dick. You need mods. I know. I'm actually, Brett, I want you to be a mod. I don't know how to make you one. Maggots are ineducable. Anyway, I did get rid of some of the most belligerent ones. Most crimes are done by U.S. citizens. Oddly enough, that's no one said. No, somebody did. That's why I was responding to it. How would an illegal vote without registering? Illegals don't vote. It's harder to love and think than hate and be a maggot. All right. Facts and logic are kryptonite to the maggots. And yes, COVID was real. COVID's still ongoing, by the way. Just saw some. Yes, it's not like COVID went away at some point. They are illegal. They don't get due process. Read the law, you damned. I don't have any idea. You don't know what you're talking about, do you, Mary? You really have no idea what you're talking about. There's a guy live on YouTube called Dennis Herrera. Look him up. Bro is an immigrant that lives the MAGA false info. There was some guy that, one of these hardcore immigrant MAGAs that now he's getting deported. Got his green card revoked for some reason. And everything's fun and games until it affects you. Just like these sorry anti-vaxxers. Remember that website? We were talking about how COVID is real just not too long. There used to be a site called sorryantivaxxer.com. All these anti-vaxxer people that were getting COVID and either dying or nearly dying of COVID. All right, so let's go to the next one. Article 1. No, wait, I never got to article. The Fifth Amendment, the mandates roller. The Fifth Amendment violations are the mandates voter roll purges by the DHS database, Save America, every 30 days, because you don't have you can't. If you get purged from the voter rolls, there's no right to confront your accuser. Kills a 90-day quiet period. Here's one of the things. I want you to listen to this. I don't care if you're MAGA or not. This is important. Right now, there is a federally mandated 90-day quiet period that says you cannot purge your voter rolls within 90 days of the election. Why does the SAVE Act need to get rid of that particular thing? All right, especially when you have every 30 days, the state is requiring, or the law requires you purge your voting rolls every 30 days. And you have a lot of states where the registration deadline can be 60, 90 days out. So you can legitimately have, and 25%, north of 25% of the people that are purged based on this database's information, over 25% of the people are actually flagged as false positive for non-citizens. So you have people that are actually citizens being flagged and removed from voter rolls based on a false information, right? And then you could have it, they will be flagged and removed after the registration deadline without being notified, and then not be able to have time to re-register. Like if the deadline has already passed and you got falsely removed, there's nothing you can do about it. It is not a question of whether or not people can be disenfranchised. It's a question of how many people will be disenfranchised. When you have 25% false flag rate, it's just a matter of how many, not whether people are being removed. People ask, well, what's wrong with it if you're not worried about it? I'm not worried about being rightly removed. I'm worried about being wrongly removed. All kinds of people are being falsely flagged. There was a guy that registered. He was a naturalized citizen. He registered to vote on the day he naturalized. Happiest day of his life. That's why he wanted to go and register to vote. And this system flagged him as a non-citizen. Oh, what? You make no... Oh, please don't tell me you're done with me, Mary. Oh, my heart. However will I recover? My friend and I both caught COVID at the same time. He died. I'm sorry, Michael. We were in Walmart with a bunch of illegal aliens. That my friend and I both caught COVID at the same time. He died. We were in Walmart with. Well, they might have caught it from your friend or somebody else. I mean, maybe if you had a mask on. I don't know. Gonfall. I don't watch these kind of movies. I don't. Dennis Herrera. If he's a MAGA, of course he's a stupid person. None of what you are saying is a fact. No, didn't get anything I'm saying from Reddit, and everything I'm saying is a fact. That you have to like just go into this knee-jerk and denialism is indicative of what the problem is in this country. A group of people that come from Mexico were coughing. Okay. I just want to point out that the COVID rate in the United States was higher than the COVID rate in Mexico. You were more likely to get COVID in America from an American than you were in Mexico from a Mexican. So let's not jump to conclusions. They are arresting Burn in Americans. I don't know what that means. Hey Walter, how you doing today? Just put in for my PA mail. Oh, Pennsylvania mail-in ballot. It's not automatic. You ask to renew yearly. They ask you for your ID to get one. No fraud in Pennsylvania. You talk to them, ask them where they were from and their citizens. Yeah. How do you know? How do you know they were Mexicans? No, it's fraud because every vote cast is disenfranchised. No, it's a fraud because every vote cast is disenfranchised by the filibuster rule in the Senate. The legislative branch possesses a power that the executive nor the judicial possesses. That is unconstitutional. Is that just, are you talking about the filibuster in general? I don't understand the. I have to do that. I'm going to have to. All right, hang on. I know what I'm going to do. Hang on a second. I have to actually go to the YouTube. I broadcast from StreamYard because I broadcast to more than one place, but I'm going to do this. All right. Okay. All right. Okay, let's see if I can find Brett. All right, there he is. Okay. All right, Brett, you're a mod now. So have at it. You're free to do whatever you want. I think you know my standard. Like I do like have something, like I don't want to be too brutal, but I also don't want to just have trolls running the show. Hey, it used to be that attitude that you were supposed to have as an American citizen was to assist for a well understanding that you've become a target if you have a certain look. Right. If your married name doesn't match your birth certificate or two forms of ID, the government is now forcing you to get another one that matches your current name. So if you can't afford to get a new ID, you're kind of bleeped. And not everybody lives in the same state that they were born in, So a lot of people, it's like you have to go online, you have to order it. It takes 6 weeks, 8 weeks. Oh man, Robert Duvall died? Dude. Did that happen? Man. That dude was a legend. Wow. Rest in peace, Robert. People are mean. No, that's not the deal. The only people that won't get a new ID are criminals, knowing that if they show up, they'll be arrested. So the demo. Where is your evidence for this? Why do you think that this is what the demo? What is that even supposed to mean, Dave? That's just sort of nonsensical. The only people that won't get a new ID are criminals. I think you mean are criminals, knowing that if they show up to get it. So what is like what does all that even mean? The Dow's over 50,000. Hey, Randy. Randy Rainbow. Why did I want to call you Randy? Anyway, how you doing, Rainbow? How's it going? I feel like it's been a hot minute. I have another dermatologist appointment tomorrow. Yippee. I hope it goes well. How are you doing, buddy? 64 closure rule. Only 5 times specifically in the Constitution. Yeah, okay. Well, the Constitution doesn't say you can't do it. We're not debating whether or not the filibuster rule is relevant or is constitutional. I mean, it's been around like for a while. By the way, did you know that there were more filibusters while Obama was president than before Obama was president? That's kind of an interesting fact. Yeah, we're not talking about voter ID laws. Have you noticed, normal people, have you noticed that all the MAGAs keep talking about the SAVE Act as though it's a voter ID law, and I am not at all but talking about it being a voter ID law. Okay, so back to the slideshow. I'm going to have to finish this. Mandates voter roll purges. So it's a violation of Fifth Amendment because you can basically have your registration removed and never be told to and never have a chance to defend yourself. It's not a violation of Article 1. The general argument here is that the Constitution does give Congress authority over the manner, but not over the qualifications. Like you can say how, like it can have some say in how the election happens, but in terms of deciding the qualifications of the voters, that is left entirely up to the states. How the states determine how the voters are prove their citizenship, and this is not some. This is established law. This is, there's precedent for this. There's Arizona and Kansas, and there's some other cases where the Supreme Court has heard this and decided that it is the state's job to determine how the qualifications are determined. The Congress can't tell them that. So the SAVE Act may exceed the authority that Congress has. And I just want to point out that this ironically violates federalism, because for most of my adult life, and Brett, I'm sure you'll agree, like the Republicans have always been the ones that have been yelling about federalism. Like with the Affordable Care Act, it was all unfunded mandates, unfunded mandates, unfunded mandates. It's always the Republicans that have been talking about how bad how federalism is so important, that the states keep their power. Even just a few years ago, when the Democrats were talking about passing a Voting Rights Act that protected the voters' rights, the Republicans screamed about, this was overreach by the Congress, that they didn't have that authority. But now all of a sudden they have authority to do it. Okay, so now let's go back to the Anderson verdict thing. For those that were not here at the beginning, I'll just repeat what Anderson verdict refers to. There were two cases. One was Anderson versus the state of Ohio. Anderson versus the state of Ohio said that John Anderson and his voters were suing the state of Ohio because they had a March 8th deadline to get your name on the ballot. And they said that was too early and that the voters' rights to vote for Anderson were being violated by having that early of a requirement. And the Supreme Court decided that's true, that for the state to do it a month later or whatever wasn't going to cost the state anything. It's a minimal burden on the state, and the voters lose their right to vote for the person they want to vote for. And so that's the Anderson side of this. The Burdick side was this guy named Alan Burdick, and he was suing Hawaii because Hawaii had this law that there was no write-in ballots. And Burdick wanted to do a write-in ballot. And then like his lawyer was like, hey, if he wanted to vote for Donald Duck, he should be able to vote for Donald Duck. He didn't vote for Donald Duck, but the argument was you should be able to write in whoever you want. And Hawaii's defense was, look, we make it easy to get on the ballot. If Donald Duck wanted to be on the ballot, Donald Duck could be on the ballot, and then he could vote for Donald Duck. And then the court ruled that because Hawaii's standards to get on the ballot were so easy that they're for them to go through and go through the cost and everything of counting all these write-in votes that had no chance of winning anyway. The burden on the state was greater than the loss of somebody being able to write in Donald Duck as their candidate or whatever. So now there's this sliding scale between the voters and the state. Which is greater, the burden on the state or the burden on the voters? And as we've established, only about 1 in 5 million votes are fraudulent, and even that's a tiny percentage of those are affected by this SAVE Act. Only 51 votes over 44 years would have been impacted by the SAVE Act. So the burden on the state is almost non-existent. But the burden on the voters is there's millions and millions of people that could be affected by it. So when you're looking at the Anderson Burdick scale, this is all the way over. It's cranked all the way over to the Anderson side. There's 21 million that lack the documents to register immediately. There's a $8 to $165 cost of poll tax to be able to get those documents. There's the time, the transportation, the bureaucracy they have to deal with. There's these circular traps that we talked about where they need their ID to get their birth certificate, but they need their birth certificate to get their ID. There's discriminatory impact, which violates the 14th Amendment, where it affects, people of color more, affects women more, especially married women. It eliminates convenient methods, such as registering online or updating your registration online. It eliminates registration drives and things like that. It also criminalizes workers if they do something wrong, which, by the way, will limit the number of people that are willing to volunteer to be workers, because nobody's going to want to be a worker if they can go to jail if they make a mistake. The justification for this, the claim justification, is non-citizen fraud. But again, 51 cases in 44 years. That's a rate of 1 in 5 million votes for 1 out of every 5 million votes. Non-citizens, 61 cases in 44 years. That would prevent 51 cases, or 3.9%. The 51 It's not 61 because 10 of those people had fake IDs that would have stood up to the SAVE Act. In Kansas, they stopped 31,000 actual citizens from voting. When they passed a similar law, they stopped 0 non-citizens from voting, and that's why it was overturned. GOP audits that have tried to prove non-citizen voting, including red states like Florida and Texas, have tried so hard to prove that there's this big, massive voter fraud, and they can't come up with anything. They'll say, oh, there's these non-citizens that are registered, and it's like a relative handful, and those non-citizens didn't even vote. So it's virtually non-existent. The state, it costs the state nothing to not do this. Big stat, massive burden, non-existent justification. Massive burden on the voters, non-existent justification by the states. So these are the two sides, right? Like the burden on the voters versus the justification by the state. If the justification by the state is greater than the burden by the voters, then this law stands. If the burden by the voters is greater than the justification by the state, the law shouldn't stand. SAVE Act fails the Anderson-Burdick test spectacularly. It also violates the 24th Amendment, the poll tax, that you can't have a poll tax because you've got all these people that effectively have to pay money, even if it's for a birth certificate, even if it's only $8, it's still a poll tax. It's still unconstitutional. And as we discussed in the one Virginia case, it shows that documentation counts as a poll tax. There's the Fourth Amendment Equal Protection Clause, which it violates because it affects people of color and married women more. It violates the First Amendment, freedom of association rights, by doing away with registration drives. It affects the Fifth Amendment due process rights by being able to take away your right to vote without you even getting a chance to defend yourself. It affects Article 1, violation of Article 1 of the Constitution by giving Congress power it does not have. It violates the very principle of federalism, and it violates all kinds of precedents. So it is a spectacularly unconstitutional piece of legislation. All right. See if we got some new. I had to replace my ID several times, I know. I don't know what that has to do with anything. I mean, replacing your ID is one thing. Getting it if you haven't had it is another. And we're not talking about ID. We're talking about a birth certificate. You're playing word games. Replacement ID is not people getting a new one. You're assuming people already have one. Exactly. And if they don't have one and they need a birth certificate to get one, how do they get their birth certificate if they don't have one? Two proofs. Yeah, like in Texas, you need, like I had to get mine. I had to use my birth certificate and my social security card and a picture ID. My old Texas driver's license, or my old Illinois driver's license. Things have changed since the boomer era. If you don't have the brains, it's not about whether people have the brains to get an ID, Jay. You apparently don't have the brains to figure that out. Like, if you cannot cognitively process the fact that this has nothing to do with brains, like if you were born and didn't get a birth certificate when you were born, that is not about you not having the brains to do something. Like, what a baby is supposed to say, mother, Father, I demand a birth certificate. Give it to me now. There are millions of Americans that just, there's 3.8 million Americans that either, one, were never provided a birth certificate in the first place, or two, their original birth certificate was destroyed in like in a fire or something. There just is no birth certificate to provide them. Everybody needs an ID. Yes, we're not talking about IDs. You're 30 and you act like you're 20. Learn to think. You can have a state ID or a driver's license and still not be able to register to vote. This is not about IDs. Equal protection under the 14th Amendment is great. Let's talk about progressive federal income tax. We're not talking about that. If only there were like a constitutional amendment that talks about income taxes. The income tax, the progressive income taxes, has been debated by the Supreme Court many, many times. Read the court history. I was caught on ID. Yeah, it's a pain. I've had to go through it. I can't remember how I finally figured out how to do it. It's a pain in the butt. Standard non-driver photo ID card in Pennsylvania costs $42.50. A real ID compliant non-driver card, which allows air travel, costs $30 plus the renewal fees. Passport and real ID, yeah. And real ID, I think there's a lot of people that are confused. Real ID, there are some states, like I think Minnesota and Michigan. I think mostly it's like northern border states. I don't think there's many on the southern border. But there are some states that have, you can get citizen put on your real ID card, and it will say that you're a citizen there, and you can use that to like go over the border. It's like a little mini passport type thing. Texas is not one of those states where you can do that. If your real ID has that, then you can use that to vote, or to register to vote. But most people don't. And if you didn't specifically go through the process of getting one, and I think you have to pay an extra fee for that too. Like you would know if you had done that because you would have had to deliberately do it. The default is the regular ID. So there are some cases where the real ID can be used, but in the vast majority of cases, it cannot. Okay, because it's the first time you heard something does not mean it doesn't happen. It just means that you've lived a very sheltered, narrow life. Maybe you should like consider the possibility that at the ripe old age of 30, there are things that happen in this world that you are not familiar with. I went to the hospital twice to get copies of my birth certificate, which is cool if the hospital is A, still there, and B, you live in the same place, like same area where you were born. I was born in Delhi, Louisiana. I live in Elgin, Texas. It's like a 10-hour drive for me to get to the hospital where I was born. And there are a lot of people where the hospital is just not there anymore because it burned down, and the documents burned down with it. Those IDs, so I do not price your citizenship. I don't know what that means. Many people go through it. It's a reality. I literally just went through exactly why it is unconstitutional. That you don't understand it does not mean it's not true. There are actual, like, real things in the world that you don't seem to understand. And then he says, again, you people just proving y'all don't know anything. We know what you don't know. That doesn't mean we don't know it. I think you've got things on backwards. This is just Google has even changed the names of meaning words like fascism. Yes, Google changed the meaning of the word fascism. Just go get a driver's license. You need 6 points. Proof. Yeah, that's the way it is. They have, I think they do that in Texas too. Hey, Kitty, guess what? Brett got promoted. Brett's a moderator now, like you. So hopefully we have somebody now that can aid when you're not around. So Noah Webster's blah blah. You realize that different words are that words are defined differently in different dictionaries, right? It's so weird. You wouldn't be this triggered by the Google definition of fascism if you didn't meet it, by the way. Kind of telling on yourself there, buddy. Oh, no, I'll always need you, Kitty. You're my kitty. One of my kitties. Oh, speaking of kitties, Rainbow is here. Hospital clerks are known not to write perfectly, especially. Yeah, it's sometimes it's like there was one guy I was talking to on Twitter that his mom went to go get her birth certificate and it wouldn't work because her parents had not thought of her name yet, so they just wrote Baby Johnson or whatever on her birth certificate. And so it's the first name was Baby, and it didn't match her first name. It wouldn't work. Yeah, that's to get your driver's license too. The citizenship requirements, and I think I've seen a lot of people that will say, I got mine, I was able to register without that or whatever. Most states, your citizenship, your requirements to register to vote are going to change. Only 3 states right now have the same standard that the SAVE Act would have. Only 3 states. I forget the third one. 2 of them are Wyoming and New Hampshire. And even those don't have the things like where it has to be updated in person and stuff. More people will be prevented from voting legally than from voting illegally by the SAVE Act. The only thing it's going to save is if the Republicans have their way, the majority in Congress. Learn to think, bro. You're the one that doesn't think. You are just repeating what you're told to. Who is telling me to repeat these things? You do not have evidence or facts. I'm literally giving you evidence and facts. You're just saying that I'm telling what some mysterious person told me to. Like the AI social media prototypes we humans are. Congratulations, Brett. Brett, he's our man. If he can't do it, no one can. Go, Brett. Kitty, you're out. All right. I got out of my ID trap because I actually ran into somebody I worked with in the past that was working at SSA. She helped me, but if I didn't, I'd still be in that trap probably. It's really, really difficult. And especially like you can't even get a driver's license or something, It's not just about because I lost my driver's license because I didn't really like when I was in my 20s. It was like 22, 23. I didn't drink. I didn't really ever seem to need my license. And then I lost it. And I lost it for like 6 months or whatever, and it expired. And then I was like, I need to get a new one. And then I went to go get a new one, and they're like, where's your birth certificate? And I didn't have a birth certificate. So I had to order my birth certificate. Anyway, can't remember. Anyway, so I went like a year without any ID at all. As of April 2025, 75% of PA drivers, 7 million drivers, do not have a real ID. Wow. All right. I'm just. How about if you're gonna say something like this is just the general vague insults and ignoring what I've said doesn't really work anymore. If you want to say something relevant, Paradigm, then I'll read it. But just the general smear, stupid stuff isn't like really doing anything. If you have something of substance, go ahead. But right now, you're about as substantive as air. I have a real ID, and I didn't need it. No, again, this is nothing. What the current laws are have no relevance at all on the SAVE Act. And the SAVE Act is not. And what proof do y'all have that Southern Democrats are racist? Really just I don't even know what you're talking about, Paradigm. I don't see anybody here saying that Southern Democrats are racist. To get a real ID, you need to show your birth certificate or a passport. To get a passport, you need to show your birth certificate. But you don't have to be a citizen to get a real ID. You can be a non-citizen and get a real ID. Funny how elections worked up until Trumpy came along. Yeah. You know what else is funny? Is how when Obama was president and Trump won, when Trump won, Obama was president one time and Biden was president one time. When Biden won, Trump was president. So if the Democrats are rigging the election, how come they're only rigging the election when Trump is president? How does that work out? I can never figure out how the Republican timeline works. You need proof of a birth certificate and proof of residency. Yeah, that I think you need to have like a bill with your name on it or something. I'm so sick of Donald Trump and his administration lying about everything. You approve of people from a country with a 68 IQ fleecing us for billions. Do you pay tax? I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know. Ask the FBI agents that raided the Georgia. Ask them what? The SAVE Act is just another steps towards Gilead. Ooh. Yes, the SAVE Act is one step forward into the AI future. I'm sick of his followers believing every lie. I don't know what where we're on to Somalis. Anyway, let's get back to this. We're almost done. Arizona. So these are a couple of the court. Oh, whoops. Let me get rid of this. A couple of the court cases. Arizona versus Intertribal Council. There was a 7-2 decision about the proof of citizenship, and NVRA prevents documents requirements. So that's the Voter Rights Act, or the mobile voter laws prevent document requirements. This goes into the registration requirements that you have to bring your registration into a building. The NVRA requires that states have means to register people through mail-in or online registration. The SAVE Act says you can't do that. So the SAVE Act actually contradicts the NVRA, so you have to either repeal the NVRA or the SAVE Act is unconstitutional, because you can't both require states to do a thing and then forbid them from doing it at the same time. Same ruling was this 10th court in Kansas. SAVE Act amends NVRA to avoid this, but all other violations remain. Summary. The main thing is that the SAVE Act prevents a problem that doesn't exist. There is no problem with non-citizens voting. There just isn't. I don't care how many times you say it, no matter how vehemently you say it. I don't care how firmly you stomp your feet as you say it. I don't care if Donald Trump says it. I don't care if Stephen Miller says it. I don't care if Stephen Miller yells it. I don't care if Jesse Waters says it. I don't care what infographics are behind his head when he says it. It doesn't happen. There have been a total of like 66 or 72, depending on what you're looking at, total cases of non-immigrants voting that have been actually proven in the last 44 years, and only 51 of those would have been prevented by the SAVE Act. 51 in 44 years. But it blocks 21 million legal voters or makes them have to jump through hoops in order to be able to vote. It violates the 24th, 14th, 1st, and 5th Amendments. It also violates the Article 1 of the Constitution. It fails the Anderson-Burdick test spectacularly. And Jim Crow, it is Jim Crow 2.0. It is functionally discriminatory. It is not a solution. It is voter suppression. So when people ask, why are you so worried about it if you're not here illegally? Well, I'm worried about it because there are people that are here legally. There are people that are citizens that are going to be denied the chance to vote. The question is, why am I worried about non-citizens not being able to vote? The question is, why aren't you worried about citizens being denied the right to vote out of this pretext that non-citizens are voting, even though it is provable that they are not? If they wanted to be taken seriously, one, they should make the documents free. They should expand the office hours so that people can go and register when they don't have to take time off of work. They should be using back-end verification. They should be grandfathering in existing voters. They should be allowing for online updates to registration. They should be allowing online registration. What they are doing is eliminating the most convenient methods. Why are they doing that? You should really ask yourself, why are they doing that? Do you think that making it so that you can't update your address online somehow prevents undocumented people from being able to vote? No. You think criminalizing workers makes it so that undocumented people aren't going to be able to vote? No. You think that using these error-prone purges, that 25% of the people that are being purged are actually American citizens? You think that's a coincidence? No, this is not about keeping non-immigrants from voting. This is about keeping American citizens that the Republican Party doesn't agree with from voting. How many so this is the question that I would like to leave you with. How many eligible citizens are you willing to prevent from voting to solve a problem that doesn't exist? Remember Kansas. They stopped 31,000 citizens from voting, and not one non-citizen, 31,000 citizens, not one non-citizen. Are you okay with that? I'm not. That bothers me. That upsets me. It should upset you. How did you connect with me? I was scrolling through the channels on YouTube. I'm glad you ended up on this one. You are a awesome follower, I guess. Once you understand that you're cattle, you will understand why they do what they do. You know what cows do for entertainment? They go to the movies. Can I be a Republican, mostly support Trump and not be MAGA? No. You can't. Nah, playa. And Trump is not Trump is a rhino. When you talk like one of the like federalism, we were talking, Republicans are like federalists, you know. They believe in federalism. They believe that the federal government should not be able to tell states how to run their states. And now they're got them trying to tell them that they have to use their state police to carry out in federal immigration law. They want to tell the states how to run their elections. Yeah. They're doing, if the Democrats had tried to do the same thing the Republicans are doing right now, the so-called Republicans are doing, they would be throwing fits. You can always mention me on YouTube and I will get enough. Even if you're not on the channel. Yes, I pay federal taxes. If so, why? Because I actually don't have a problem paying my taxes. I think that if I get what I pay for, you know, I think that we have benefit from our taxes. So we can, yes, we can enjoy the freedoms and benefit pleasures of America. Violates the freedom of speech, how? Violates the freedoms of association. If you deny that people can mail in or like then can do registration drives, that falls under the First Amendment. When you say that you can't, you have to go into the DMV or whatever to register, you're denying registration drives. This is, again, it's a settled matter. It's not a hypothetical one. Registration drives are already considered constitutionally protected, and when you make registration drives fundamentally non-functional, you're denying that First Amendment right. Doesn't matter how much it costs. It's a poll tax. Also, it might cost you $15 to get your birth certificate mailed to you, but that cost varies by state. It depends on where you're born. Mine was $40. And it can be more if you need it sooner. Like there's a time thing too. I am too intelligent. You're not too intelligent to know the difference between T-O and T-O-O, though. Not if you're born out of country. Well, that's... Dragon Master thinks everyone has access to a computer. That's a good point. And a car to get around. If you are born out of country and lost your birth certificate or never got the translation, blah, 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 it's a pain in the ass. You still need to get... What? I mean, if you're a U.S. citizen born abroad, what if you're not a U.S. citizen born abroad? I guess then you just need the naturalization certificate. What the stupid Republicans do not get is that it is going to disenfranchise the... And that's the thing is, I think there are like rural people it's going to affect, and not just because It's going to affect the rural community a lot, because the rural community is going to have to, like, they have to drive that much further to get to their DMV to, update things, number one. Number two, married women actually voted for Trump 54 to 46. So the whole thing about the women, it's going to actually affect the Republicans more than the Democrats. But I will fight for people's rights to vote Trump as much as I will fight for people's rights to vote against Trump. Please don't group all Republicans in the same boat. Even Mike Pence is not on board with this guy anymore. Even Marjorie Taylor Greene. Yeah, I think there's a difference between a Republican and a Trump supporter. And I think, like Walter, I don't know if you know Joe Walsh, but he's actually been on the show. There are traditional conservative Republican principles which the Trump administration does not follow. Please don't group all. I don't, just like I do not group all the leftists in the same boat. Good point to mention for sure. Yes, I agree. That is a ship that sails both ways. Sean Hannity has been screaming Epstein literally since Bill Clinton was in office. Has he stopped? I don't know what that has to. And auto-corrected to the wrong spelling? Oh. MAGA has been done. The only ones left are PEDs and supremacists. Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, the only MAGAs that are left are PEDs and supremacists. Which one are you? Hannity may have mentioned them, but now that I don't watch Hannity, so I don't really know anything about it, but I haven't seen any, like viral clips of him or anything skewering Trump over Epstein. Savage to go to the hole, close the lid. Go to the hole. I don't know what that means. There's I don't know if you watched John Oliver yet from last night, but there's a Netflix show starting with have you seen it, Kitty? There's a Netflix TV show coming out with the main character. It's his name is supposed to be pronounced Harold Hole, but John Oliver kept calling him Harry Hole. Whose idea was it to have a character named Harry Hole? Oh my goodness. Harry Hole. Do you like that, Pure Joy? That was, it took me a second. Harry Hole? How is that not funny? Think about holes that might be hairy. Anyway, I'm starting to feel a little like not well, so I think we're gonna sign off a bit early tonight. Yeah, John, watch the watch it if you can. He talked about Minnesota and ICE and the DHS, and actually I learned a lot. I always learn when I watch that show. So anyway, I'm gonna get going. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Welcome to the moderation team, Brett. Appreciate you. I'll talk to you guys later.